So 84 people in 7 states President Biden won in 2020 served as fake electors for Donald Trump. Now, state and federal prosecutors have investigated this fake elector scheme for months now. And last night, Fulton County DA Fani Willis indicted 3 of Georgia's fake electors: David Schaefer, Kathy Latham, and Sean Still. Combined, these 3 are facing 26 criminal charges, including forgery, making false statements, and violating Georgia's RICO statute. Those Georgia fake electors are now part of a club that includes Michigan's 16 fake electors who were charged by that state's attorney general last month, which begs the question, are we reaching the sort of critical mass that is needed for more states to try these people in earnest? In Arizona, State Attorney General Kris Mayes, a Democrat who took office this January, she is currently investigating that state's group of fake electors and other thwarted attempts to flip the vote to Trump. You might remember former Arizona House Speaker Rusty Bowers, who, like Brad Raffensperger down in Georgia, defied Trump's pressure to reverse Biden's victory. We asked Attorney General Mayes' office for an update on that Arizona investigation, and we received no comment. Joining me now to discuss all this is MSNBC legal analyst, our not-so-secret weapon, Lisa Rubin. Lisa, thanks for being here. This is something we casually talk about at the water cooler, like, when's it going to happen in Arizona? But the parallels between what happened in Arizona and what happened in Georgia in the 2020 election are eerily similar.
Yep.
How much do you think this Georgia indictment sort of puts the pressure or pushes the ball forward over in Arizona?
Yeah, I wouldn't call it pressure, right? Because each state is its own political ecosystem.
Yeah.
And one of the key differences here is that Republicans in Arizona still pledge fealty to Donald Trump. And those that didn't, like Rusty Bowers or even Mark Brnovich, who was the state's attorney general, ran for higher office and didn't succeed because he took on Donald Trump. Those people no longer have power in Arizona.
Yeah.
On the other hand, in Georgia, they did. And so they were unafraid to talk to Fani Willis, whether they did so voluntarily or sort of wink, wink, nod, nod, send me a subpoena and I'll come in. Those people had to have been tremendously helpful to her. And in Arizona, it remains to be seen whether Kris Mayes will get that kind of cooperation from Republicans who are privy to those conversations with Donald Trump.
Yeah, that's such an important distinction, actually, the way the Georgia Republicans handled this versus the Arizona Republicans. It tells you something about the state of the Republican Party in state-by-states across the country. What about Nevada? Because Nevada is mentioned in the Jack Smith federal indictment, and yet the Nevada AG has not brought any charges here and is also a Democrat.
Right. And the Nevada AG has actually said publicly he doesn't intend to, because he doesn't believe the statutes in his state would allow him to bring a case. He actually stood up and supported Nevada state legislators who wanted to make being a fake elector itself a crime in Nevada. But where it came to, sort of more nebulous statutes that could apply to lots of different situations like forgery or solicitation, he, unlike Fani Willis, thought that wasn't enough. So he announced in May he would not bring charges. I'll be curious to see whether this indictment causes Aaron Ford, who is the Democrat elected AG in Nevada, to revisit that conversation.
Well, you'd think, and let's talk about Josh Kaul over in Wisconsin, the Democratic AG. With the sort of opening, I don't know, would you call it a Pandora's box? Once one Fulton County DA says, look at what happened in our state, it was a miscarriage of justice, and you're sitting there as a Democrat in your own state where the same thing basically unfolded, it seems to me that it's incumbent upon these Democrats to do something or have a very good reason as to why they're not. And I wonder if you think that moves the AG in Wisconsin, too.
I'm not sure. And Josh Kaul has sort of been a vault on this, right? We've asked him, others have asked him, do you plan to investigate? And he's basically said, I have been in contact with federal government, and that's all I'm going to say. I do think in Nevada, Jack Smith might have something more up his sleeve, and that's because what happened in Nevada was particularly egregious. The Secretary of State under Nevada law is required to preside over any meeting of the electors. That Secretary of State, a Republican at the time, Barbara Kagafsky, had already signed the certificate of ascertainment for the real electors.
For Biden.
Correct. And the fact that 2 of Nevada's 6 electors have received partial immunity, reportedly from Jack Smith, makes me think that Jack Smith is not done with the Nevada story. Even if it never shows up in an indictment against Donald Trump himself, will it show up in future indictments against any of the unindicted co-conspirators or people who have remained to be seen, still in the shadows with respect to the Trump federal indictment in D.C.?